All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. First, I want to just congratulate all of you in the audience as you approach graduation in less than a month. It's so exciting and scary and stressful and like all of the different feelings going on at the same time. So today is our second day of senior week, dedicated to professional development for graduating seniors like yourselves. And today we have things that I wish I knew before I started or before starting my first job. And today we have Mary Claire Schneider, a 2015 liberal arts alum with us today. And she's going to be presenting on this topic. And the presentation will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel after its completion. So if there's anything that she goes over today that you want to revisit, it will be there for your reference. I encourage you to ask as many questions as you want. We have an expert here. And with that, I'm going to stop my screen share and hand it over to you, Mary Claire.
Thanks. Sounds good. Hi, everyone. My name's Mary Claire. I am, like Lauren said, a 2015 alum. I graduated with a double major in econ and human development and family studies, and I minored in business and the liberal arts. And now I have spent the last 7 years since graduating working at 2 different jobs for Deloitte Consulting. And so I have some insight on how much it kicked my butt when I first got started, and I can share some of my stories. But please, like Lauren said, I'll go over as much as I've prepared, but I'm happy to answer any questions as we go along. And Lauren's monitoring the Q&A, so she'll flag me if I'm, moving forward without addressing any questions that come through. So yeah, I started in human capital consulting, which I don't know if anybody has heard of that. I didn't know what it was until like fall of my senior year when I discovered that consulting existed. But I worked for the states of, Commonwealth of Kentucky and state of Louisiana for their human services systems and helped train caseworkers and the residents of those states how to use them. And then did that for 4 years and found that it was time for me to do something different and change the pace and lifestyle of what I was doing. And so I was able to move internally to a different place in Deloitte, where I now work on training for our partners and lead client service professionals with account management and things like that. So like state of Louisiana, their main account manager, we help that person to, cultivate high performing teams, build strong client relationships, manage the financials and the risk, that kind of thing. So I really like it. So if anybody has any questions about that either, you can feel free to reach out afterwards through Lauren or LinkedIn or whatever. And across all this time, I've also moved 4 times. I've lived I started out in Harrisburg, lived in Pittsburgh for a little bit, moved to New York, and now I'm back in Pittsburgh. I'm expecting my first baby, so that's pretty new. And when I'm not pregnant, I enjoy running and trying new breweries. So I guess that's my deal. And so what we're focusing on today is making the transition from school to work. So I know there's that raise hand feature in Zoom. If you're willing to kind of share, I was hoping to get a sense of where everybody is right now. If you can raise your hand, if you know where you'll be working this summer, or like post-graduation, can you raise your hand? I know it's not like a guaranteed thing. Nice. Thank you for raising your hands. Cool. And then for those who do know, where you're starting work after graduation, can you raise your hand if you're going to be working remote? Ooh, it looks like you guys will get to be in person. Cool. I've been remote like since November of 2019. I switched to my remote job, so it's a lot different, but I at least started out in person. So I was just wondering kind of where everybody was with this group. So just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about today. And I'm just looking at my second screen with the presentation here. So we're going to be talking about expectations of new employees, just general professional expectations, helping you to build a foundation for success, some pitfalls, what it looks like on day one and what to think about and consider, thinking about networking. I know that's always an intimidating term and it's different at every company, but just I'll share some things about my experience. Lauren's going to help with some social media stuff since I haven't been on my Facebook in years and haven't posted on my Instagram in years and casually creep LinkedIn, but nothing. I'm not an expert there. I guess I don't put myself in a bad position with it, but I'm definitely not active there. Wellness in the workplace and moving on to your next role, if that's what's in store for you. So if you think about it, when you're graduating, everyone who's graduating is in an entry-level position from undergrad is pretty much at a similar place, especially if you're a liberal arts student who is known for your soft skills rather than, like my husband is a chemical engineer and he had all of these specific skills that he was bringing to his entry-level role. And so you want to think about kind of where you're coming from. Refer back to your job description of the job that you applied for, because I think that can be really reinforcing, reminding yourself that you're qualified for the kind of position that you're starting. Because a lot will be asked of you and you're capable of learning these things, but from day one, it's really hard to absorb it all and hit the ground running and things like that. So things that are within your control are these expectations here. So enthusiastic and eager to learn, positive energy, the optimism, openness, managing your own expectations, pacing and scheduling your work, and then willing to go above and beyond and be flexible. One thing that I definitely remember being difficult for me was pacing and scheduling my work. I had some pretty bad habits. People are doing, one second, let me just close my window because people are doing some landscaping. That's better. Hopefully it wasn't bothering you. But anyway, when I first started, I developed really bad habits in college. Well, I mean, they were like fine habits because it worked for a college schedule, but I would go really hard for like 2 days on, preparing for a test or submitting a paper or things like that. But then I'd be able to like phone it in for 2 days. I'd make sure I made it to class, but I wouldn't have any other big assignments sometimes. And I would have days to rest. I think senior year, I didn't have any classes on Mondays and Wednesdays. So things like that, where I could really shut down to recover from procrastinating and then and then going all in on certain assignments. And so one thing that I found was really difficult was just being in my chair for 8 hours a day at my place of work and being expected to meet deadlines, but then continue to show up and be present and move on to the next thing the next day. And so it's not something that you're going to understand right away, what you're capable of doing pace-wise. I remember being really insecure and frustrated about how I know that I can do these things that are being asked of me, but I'm just out of steam and I don't know how to manage that. And it's just something that takes time, and you'll mess it up with taking on too much, probably, if you're like me. And it's just something where I think establishing a relationship of open communication and trust with your manager is going to be really important, so that you can tell them, I thought I'd be able to do it in this amount of time, or what do you typically expect people what kind of timelines do you expect from people, things like that, and having those upfront conversations and ongoing conversations as you're working through those matters is really helpful in helping you get through those initial stages of your professional journey. So that's my big thing about pacing, and then willing to go above and beyond and be flexible while also pacing and managing your own expectations. Those things are all wrapped up together, and they're all really important to have, and they all kind of contradict each other in a way. And so it's just really important to do your best and continue to raise, sorry, my lighting also like gets funky. Continue to raise how things are going to your managers. I remember being nervous also to just share like if something was taking longer. And I think you can gain a lot of trust and a lot of investment from the people that you work with if you're transparent about how things are going, but also at the same time demonstrating that you're doing your best and you're trying to improve and things like that. So it's all a lot of vague things, but it's not easy to go from a college schedule to a 9-to-5 schedule, assuming that's what you end up with. And so give yourself grace and keep at it. It all gets better eventually.
Real quick, Mary Claire, I think what you said, I think back to how maybe people felt when they first started college and like managing some of those expectations and pace, and how there's a learning curve with it. And so that's just something that I was connecting with, like, as you were speaking. It's a very similar feeling when you step into that first job, or even your next job, like whenever you step into a new professional environment. So
yeah, that's a great analogy to use. Thank you. I guess one more thing I would say around the enthusiastic and eager to learn. That's one of the things that I found was really within my control, was kind of just thinking about taking inventory of doing what I could. So one thing that I knew I could do was take really good notes in meetings. It felt like overkill at the time, but every once in a while people would ask me, like, what did they say? What did we decide on in that meeting? Or what did we say then? And I was able to refer back to my notes, which, I did my best to have like an organized system to help me be able to, sort out what the notes were and keep them straight and make them searchable. But that was something that was in my control. Another thing that was in my control was whenever we would have to use a new technology or a new tool or system, I tried to raise my hand to be the person to learn that, because I found that I felt comfortable learning new systems. And a lot of people who have been in their jobs for a long time aren't always willing to do the research, and especially take that ambiguous start of like, hey, we need a new tool to do video editing. So I would be able to research that, put together a proposal on the different options, and then present it, and then give them the high level notes on kind of what, how to use it for their purposes, while I would be the in-depth kind of subject matter expert. And that really helped me to feel a lot more secure in my contributions to the team when I didn't have that institutional knowledge of like the client that we were working for, or the system that we were building, or things like that didn't come straight at the beginning. So taking good notes and having that library of information, and also learning the new technologies or things that others might not be willing to learn, are good places to plug yourself in and add value a little earlier, depending on your job. So while I'm continuing, I'd love to see what kind of jobs you're either looking at interviewing for, or already have. If you want to put them in the chat, I can look at them as we're continuing to go through. So the next thing is professional expectations. So these are things that are just important to think about. They're things that, like I was saying, they're under your control, and they're things that pretty much apply to any job. and can really help you just keep these things in mind whenever you're first getting started. So workplace attendance, it's just really good to set expectations about, what time you're expected to show up to work and what time is acceptable to leave. It also ties into number 5 with vacation time requests. I remember being really afraid to submit my vacation time requests, and I ended up having PTO, paid time off, expire at the end of my first year. And that was such a bad move on my part. So, your time off is part of your compensation package. And the earlier you request it, the earlier that you can make sure that you get approved for it. The way that my teams work, at least, we make sure that there's at least coverage by 1 or 2 team members whenever we're taking PTO. So I have PTO next week, and so I'm making sure that I'm sending all of my materials and anything that the person who's my backup will need to cover. I'm going to set an out of office, and my PTO has been on our team's calendar for like 2 months. And so, sorry, I keep saying PTO, paid time off. So things like that, making sure that you take advantage of your time off and making sure that you show up when you're expected to show up are not difficult things. They're part of your contract and contractual agreement with when you're starting a company. And they're things that are in your control that you can really make sure that you take care of, so that that's not something that you worry about going well or going poorly. The other thing I'll just say about time off is that it's part of your compensation package. So never feel bad about taking all of your time off, because it literally is the amount that a company thinks is appropriate for you to take time away from your computer to rest and rejuvenate, or, be sick, or take care of like errands and doctor's appointments and things. And so don't let PTO expire. That's my big message there. For attention at meetings, you might be in person, you might be on Zoom all the time. You might have expectations to be on camera, you might be able to be off camera, things like that. But it's just really important that you understand the norms of those things. Attend as many meetings as possible. That's how you absorb a lot of the nuance of why the company is making decisions that they are, why your team is making decisions that they are. Ask to be invited to more meetings if you can. And if it's appropriate, I think that's just one of the ways that it can be demanding when a new person starts to be able to share with them all of the information they need to know to be able to do their job. So by having you attend, your bosses don't have to spend all this time explaining things and why they're happening. And it also gives you an opportunity to listen in and then maybe ask questions later about why certain things were discussed the way they were and why certain outcomes were decided upon, things like that. So attention at meetings is really important. Pay attention to the norms, take notes, those kinds of things. Use of technology. I'll also loop that into like emails and things like that. There are certain technologies that you'll need to use a lot with your job. So for instance, I use Outlook a lot. I went from having like a Mac when I was in undergrad to having PCs. And that was a little bit of a learning curve for me to learn Outlook, but there are tons of learnings on LinkedIn Learning. So like, let's say you start your job in July. That's what happened for me with a May graduation. You can be taking LinkedIn Learnings or YouTube videos, because I think LinkedIn Learnings, you might lose your free subscription when you graduate. I'm not really sure. Yeah. Maybe you'll be able to sign in for a few more months after graduation with your Penn State email address. But making sure you learn those kind of technologies. And if you have people at the company that you're starting at who you can reach out to and just ask, like, what are the main technologies that you rely on? I also use Microsoft Teams a lot and Zoom a ton. And so learning those really well is important. I find that sometimes when you are working with someone who's new, I'll hear a lot like, oh, I'm sorry, Skype's being so weird today. And like, usually it's just a technology understanding thing. And I don't mind when people are bad at, they're not, you know what I mean? When people are still learning a new technology, but I think when you hear someone as like an experienced professional, when you hear a new professional saying that a technology is being weird, sometimes it can get a little old. And so learning those things, those basics, and just, you know, trying to identify what the issues are and asking about them, so that you can perform better and more professionally is sometimes plays a little better, with your managers and things. For social media connections, I actually don't have like a lot of insight on this one. I usually don't connect with people on social media that I work with unless they're kind of peers and friends. So I don't know, Lauren, if you have thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's different, right, for every relationship. I always think that if you've made a friend like at work, there's no rule saying that like you can't have work friends. Like some of my closest friends, like now in living in state college, I've made through work. But at the same time, just like making sure that you're aware that those connections exist when it comes to social media. And if you do, whether you follow them on a platform or you connect with them, or you're friends with them on like whether it's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, like make sure that the content that you are posting is appropriate. I know that, and you all probably know a little bit more about this than I do as a millennial. But I know that like within Instagram and Snapchat in particular, like you can reduce like who can see some of your stories to close friends and then everyone outside of them. So thinking about who falls within those different types of categories. So yeah, it's kind of like you have to kind of feel it out when it comes to connecting on social media, and just be aware of what you're posting.
Well, yeah, good call. I definitely followed this one guy who I worked with, on Instagram for a while, and he just posted weird stuff. I don't know. It wasn't like bad or anything, but I was like, oh, this is like, you have a lot of really strong opinions about things that I didn't think people had strong opinions about. I guess I would distill it that way. So yeah, I guess now that you explain that way, that makes sense. But then I also have a friend from work who was one of my bridesmaids at my wedding. So, you know.
Yeah. It's things like the first one that, you know, make you question like if you would like to continue following them or not.
Yeah,
so.
Maybe you just like don't want to know about their personal lives. Choose wisely. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, and you really don't have to accept anyone either. I've definitely declined things. Like I would have clients, actually, thanks for your triggering memories, but I would have clients who would add me on social media, and I waited until I left those clients until I added them. Not that I posted anything, but I just didn't want to know what their deal was. Like if, you know, whatever they would post on Facebook or things like that, I just wanted to stay out of it. So I just told them I couldn't. Okay, that's good. Okay, here where we are. Dating colleagues. I mean, you've seen enough sitcoms probably to know that this like can really backfire. I also know colleagues who have gotten married. So there's like a whole spectrum, but definitely be aware of your company's policies. That's like the first place to start. And, you know, on the flip side of that, if you ever feel uncomfortable in a situation where anyone's approaching you, that's not appropriate. I know at Deloitte, we have like a lot of trainings where they tell us about how to report these kinds of things. And there's like non-retaliation policies to help protect people who report anything inappropriate. And so I think things have come a long way with the regulations around this, but definitely feel empowered to call your ethics hotlines or whatever your company has in place. You shouldn't ever have to put up with being uncomfortable at work in that way. And so, you can date there's the dating colleagues, but then there's also the flip side of that can be uncomfortable and maybe dangerous. So be cool. Political advocacy. Again, I'll speak from my experience at Deloitte. We get emails around the times of elections to let us know about, are we allowed to donate? How much can we donate? Things like that. Are we allowed to participate in campaign activities? What are the limitations of that? So just make sure that you're aware of what your company's policies are around that. It's usually allowed to some extent, and you just want to make sure that you don't cross any lines. I skipped travel expenses, and expenses in general. It's always better to err on the side of caution. Get things approved in advance. Talk to your manager if you're not sure about things, or read your company's policies. I've heard about people losing their jobs over this. It's really not worth trying to game the system. Going from the college student mindset of at least for me, I was eating bagels and eggs all the time because that's what I could afford in college, and then being able to have travel expenses because I was traveling 4 days a week most weeks. That was a huge adjustment, and there were some things that I was like, oh, I could probably use my expenses when I fly home to go grocery shopping Thursday night because it's still a work day, but talk to a colleague about it, and you're not allowed to do that because you made it back to your home city and the company is no longer paying for you to do that sort of thing. And so it's just not worth messing up. So don't. Then workplace attire. It's hard to nail down, especially I think for people who dress in a more feminine way, because there's not the standard suit and tie basics or, polo and khakis kind of thing. But, always err on the side of caution. I found a lot of work clothes at Target, especially when I first started working. I found that they didn't wrinkle. I was always looking for dresses that didn't wrinkle. And I just looked for basics. I was able to wear a pretty casual dress, jeans and a nice work top or dresses. But it's not the time to impress anyone with anything too, wild and crazy. You can dress to impress and express yourself, but I would just say, if you're wanting to wear something more bold, just give it a couple weeks maybe and read the situation. For me, working from home, today I'm wearing a dress because it's comfortable while I'm pregnant and none of my pants fit. But normally when I work from home, I'm wearing sweatpants and a nice sweater. And so you'll just be able to kind of read the situation. And it's definitely evolved through COVID. So ask your colleagues if you're not sure. Yeah. So giving notice that you'll be leaving the workplace, is this just related to if you have to go to a doctor's appointment, Lauren?
Yeah, I think anything like that, or I think that there's another slide a little bit later on.
Yeah, about actually leaving.
Yeah, for another job. Yeah.
Cool. Sorry, I know I'm spending a lot of time on this slide, but this one's pretty tactical. So there's some good things. So with my team, I just mark on my calendar that I'm out of office. There's a way to do that. And I let my team know that hey, I'm going to be unavailable this afternoon because I have to go pick my sister up from lacrosse practice or something like that. And so, this all goes back to the trust that you have with your colleagues and the expectations that you have of each other, and just staying in touch and being transparent, and continuing to have actions that reinforce the trust that you have in each other. Typically is going to be enough for you, depending on the workplace. With email response time, this is something to just ask about what the expectations are. I feel like things are usually 24 or 48 hours to respond to an email. just generally across companies, but just ask about it. And like, maybe there are certain people that you need to prioritize more than others. And that's all part of kind of figuring out, engaging, like how to proceed with things. I thought that attending happy hour once per month was good because I haven't attended a happy hour in so long. But what you can extrapolate this to is take time to do things that aren't required for your job. So to get to know people and to further your development, it's important to say yes to these things because maybe you're not loving the role that you're in right now. This is how you can make connections with people who might be doing work that interests you. You might not have to go to that community webcast all hands meeting that's like 1,000 people join and you're just listening in, but it's just good to take time for it, especially when you're new to an organization, because it just helps you learn more about the breadth of what the organization does and how you can kind of shape your career if you choose to stay at that place. Meeting project deadlines. I think this one's really important and goes back to that transparency with your bosses. One thing that I found was really helpful in figuring out how to prioritize my tasks was that I kept a really detailed to-do list of all the assignments I was assigned. And each day or each week, depends on the situation, but I would make sure that I was checking in with my boss, or if they gave me a new task, for instance, I would say, like, here's what I have currently on my list. How does this rank in terms of priorities? Or like, can any of this be deprioritized from what we talked about yesterday? Has anything changed? And you're not going to know any of that at first, unless you're like amazing and good for you. I'm jealous. I really struggled with this. This is all part of the like time management stuff. And so keeping that to-do list and asking for reinforcement about whether I had my priorities listed correctly was good. And as I got more comfortable in my new job, I was able to say, I think that this priority ranks here. So instead of just being like, what do I do? I was able to sort of evolve into saying, this is what I think are my priorities in the order of them, and the deadlines that you need them by is this right. And that demonstrated to my boss that I was learning and could manage a few more things more independently. So I think it was a good exercise and evolution of how things worked out. It took me a while to get to that point, to figuring out that was like a helpful way to go about prioritizing, but I would totally recommend doing that because it's a good way to build that trust. And then referring friends for employment. I don't know actually about this one either. Lauren.
Yeah, sure. So I think that this, as you enter into like your workplace and become a part of the network within the industry that you work, maybe you have like friends who, like colleagues who have become friends, or even like outside friends who are looking to like get into that industry. And they may ask you for some type of referral, especially within like applicant tracking systems. I know that, for instance, Penn State uses one where people from inside or outside of the university can like say that they know, say me, and ask for a referral for that job when they apply. So it's just something to think twice about because, I mean, I love my friends. There are some that I would probably recommend more than others for different types of positions. So just if you ever come across that situation, just like be very, like hone in on that professional identity of yours, because it's a reflection of you. When you go and make a referral, it's not just, okay, what is that person going to say during an interview, or what are they bringing to the application? If you make that recommendation, that word can carry weight. So just something to think about for future reference.
Nice. Yeah. And set expectations with your friends about what you're capable of doing and what you're not capable of doing. And you can phrase it as capability rather than willingness. Yeah, that's a good call. I haven't encountered that situation. But I have like kind of met people and they're like, oh, like, who do you know? Like, what open positions do you have? And I don't know that person very well. So I just go, oh, I don't know anything. I'm not even a manager. So it'll become increasingly more difficult to fall back on that, but that's kind of where I'm at. Cool. Okay, so building foundations for success. This is back to like the things that are in your control. So demonstrating your work ethic, there's again this balance, and I think companies are doing better with this, with boundaries of employees and mental health and your well-being and everything. So find that right balance for you with your work ethic. You might not get it right the first time, but stick with it. Don't be discouraged if you feel like it's all out of whack, because just maintaining those open lines of communication with your managers is important. Ask questions. I found that kind of extrapolating from the story about to-dos, if I was in meetings, I would write down my questions and ask about them later to help kind of demonstrate and also strengthen my understanding of what was going on and what was expected of me, and how the direction our team was moving. And I also would say this asking questions would extend into work that you're working on to be reviewed with your bosses. And so when you're like, let's say I do a lot of PowerPoints and Word documents and reports and things like that. And so when I'm working on those, especially when I'm newer to a role, sometimes you have to make judgment calls about certain things. And when I first started out, I was just saying, I don't know what to do here. And I could tell that was frustrating to my managers. And so what I started doing was, and the way I would phrase it would be like, I was going to do this, but I also could have handled it this way. I wasn't sure what to do. Instead of doing that, I would make my best guess, do the work, and say, I made a judgment call here about how to handle this. Let me know if you think that this is right. And then that could help demonstrate my understanding and also help them correct my assumptions, because maybe I was working under like the totally wrong assumptions. And then I was able to learn way more than if I just asked, like, what should I do here? And they told me. So again, it takes a little bit of extra work, but I think it ended up paying off and helping me to get onboarded and felt like I was, a contributing member of the team. Laugh at yourself. No one's perfect. Hopefully you've gotten a self-deprecating vibe from me. I try not to take myself too seriously, and the overly professional environment isn't for me. And I found a company and teams that also operate that way. And owning mistakes is really important anyway. So, you spend a lot of time in the workplace. So hopefully you're enjoying yourself from time to time. Remember names and faces as you meet new people. Ways to do this are like adding them as contacts on Skype. Also, sometimes I would like write org charts for myself. So like we worked a lot with a technology counterpart. So I was on the training team and we had all these technology people that we worked with who were actually developing the system that I was working on. So I would just kind of make an org chart in a notebook for myself. Other things that I would do, or sorry, not other things I would do. So the next thing is being a team player and striving to include others. You'll get that sense of appreciating when people are demonstrating inclusive behavior to you. And so it won't take long to figure out what that is and extend that to others. People are hired to teams for reasons, and you can operate on the assumption. It's a lot more pleasant to operate under the assumption that everybody else wants everybody else to be there. So, just demonstrate the behavior that you would like to be shown towards you. Meet deadlines and proofread your work. Again, this is more about deadlines, so I won't repeat myself again. But proofreading your work, read it out loud to yourself, like all those things that you do before you submit a test or that you should do before you submit a test, extend that to the workplace. It can be really discouraging as a manager to read people's work and just see the immediate flaws, and they might not get to the deeper level feedback that's really going to help you to learn your job. So try to eliminate the things that are most distracting, like grammar issues or spelling issues or formatting issues. I feel like formatting, if you have, at least if you work with the Microsoft Office suite, I've learned so many tricks over the years, and some of them were hard earned. And so that might be another LinkedIn learning thing to work through. And then volunteer, respond positively when volunteered. Again, be cognizant of your capacity, and work it into the cascade of your priorities. But volunteering for things that aren't directly involved with your job can really help you to expand as a professional, to learn about adjacent parts of the organization, to meet new people who might, become colleagues later, or closer teammates later. So it's important to just be part of things that are outside of your normal day-to-day. It also can help just your brain to exercise different things. Is there anything else, Lauren, on this one that you would add?
I don't think so. I think you covered it. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, pitfalls. Negative stereotypes about your generation and workplace attitude. I find that sometimes as like a younger person, I'm 29, but everybody on my team is like late 30s and older. So I, even though I'm not your age, I was like the younger person. And especially when I first started, people are like, "You're 22." And I was like, "Yeah." It was jarring. I didn't run around sharing my age, but sometimes people asked, or sometimes it came up or whatever, and so I find that people tend to generalize a lot about our generation. And I think sometimes it's like working in our favor when, companies are implementing all these wellness and mental health services and inclusivity and diversity, equity and inclusion initiatives and things like that. So like that's all really good. But then there's other stuff that I find might be true of my generation, or like the younger end of the workforce, that don't always apply to me. So like I'm not on TikTok, but I think it would still be expected that a 29-year-old's on TikTok. I'm not really sure. Or the other thing is, I think a lot of people talk about work purpose, and not that like it's a bad thing to have purpose, but like I don't really feel like my job is like fulfilling my greatest wishes, but I really like the people that I work with. And I really like that I can leave at 4 today and go swim laps. And I don't know. I don't know what my dream job is. So like that doesn't apply to me. And so like there are all kinds of generalizations that you'll hear, and some are negative and some are positive. And take it all with a grain of salt, because you're still an individual person with individual preferences. So not a bad thing. And also, you might be leaned on to do certain tasks, and you can really add value with things that people aren't as comfortable with, like what I was talking about with learning new technologies and things like that. Pitfalls of like workplace attitudes with overextending, overpromising, and under-delivering. It's just back to what I was saying. It's the opposite of what I was saying with knowing your priorities and doing well with that. Just be careful with that. Procrastination, also, I'm not good at that. I've gotten a way better, but that was really difficult for me. And I would find myself like not doing anything during the workday and then signing back onto my computer at night because I just needed the silence of like no emails coming in. So just like, it's all the things that you're doing in college of trying to manage that procrastination. It's just like a different environment. So it's hard, but you don't want to let things go too long. At least they're paying you instead of you're paying them for college. So that helps. And then organizational gossip and politics. With being remote, I find it really easy to stay out of all of this, just because we're not like running into each other and things like that in the hallways and hanging out after work and having drinks. None of my teammates actually live in my city. And so that's been kind of a nice thing about the pandemic. There hasn't been a lot of noise. And so I don't know, it's just not not as big a deal, but like stay out of it. It's just not worth it. It's not, and absolutely do not put things in writing. Blow off steam if you need to, but like don't put stuff in writing. Like don't accidentally send a message to the wrong person. You've seen those like, you know, on Reddit where it's like horrific stories about like, I don't know, horrible things that have happened at work. Just don't do it, because you know somebody else will, but like don't let it be you. It's no big deal. Oh, Mackenzie, I like your comment. Yeah, I'll just take a moment to speak to like not knowing what I wanted to do. I was excited about being able to do human capital consulting and for governments. But I mean, I think you heard my majors at the beginning, econ and human development and family studies. I like human services and I like helping people, and I don't have a talent for doing it like as a direct service professional, like a therapist um, or a social worker, things like that. So I was able to kind of pull the thread at the things that I felt like I was good at, which was like business, project management, organization, kind of stuff like that. And I knew I liked working and being able to serve in human services, but I didn't want to work in government and things like that. So I was happy to start with like human capital consulting in Deloitte. And it got to the point where I was like, I'm traveling too much. I'm never home. The travel points were nice for a while, but I'm like, I don't see myself being able to have this as my career because it's just burning me out. And then I was able to have the support from my colleagues to move internally and have this job that has a lot more flexibility. And it's totally not my dream job, but in a way, like it's shaping a dream life of being able to like live in Pittsburgh near my family, and like Deloitte has a 6-month maternity leave policy. Like that's insane relative to, not relative to Europe or anything, but relative to like other companies. And I really like the people I work with. And so like those are all the things that I want. And maybe I'll find my dream job at some point, but I don't know. And then in contrast, my brother is like a PhD. He's like a year and a half younger than me. And he's like a PhD psychology person who's like working for Sirius XM radio and just wrote a book and is like really passionate about research and things like that. And like, we're just totally different people. And some people find their passion, and some people like find things that they really like doing and keep chasing things that they like doing. And it's, liberal arts is like an awesome place to be, to start that journey and continue that journey. So that's my spiel for not feeling bad about not having your purpose. I still like doing things that are purpose oriented that like serve a greater good, but I don't have my dream job. So anyway, that's my tangent. I'm doing okay on time. All right. Okay, day one, smile, be on time or early. I remember for especially visiting client sites, I would drive to make sure that I knew where it was the night before, if I had that transportation. And also like leave time for yourself to get lost. Like you're never gonna have another first day. So just like take those things that are within your control and show up early. Understand expectations and ask questions. This, you know, thread has been prevalent throughout this whole presentation. Just make sure you're doing that. Learn the social and communication norms. Ask people if they prefer emails or prefer instant messages. Ask people if they're more like morning workers or afternoon workers. I know I have certain people who really like to load up the first half of their week with meetings and have the second half of their week be all about completing the tasks and doing the busy work and following up. Introduce yourself to others. This is a great time to like just say, I'm new and I want to learn more about your job in the organization. It feels sillier and sillier the further you get into your career, because you don't, you know, you've been around and you've kind of seen this person around. And so you might as well like get get it out early. And also whenever you don't have a lot of work on your plate, it's a great time to get to know others. Think twice and speak once. Similar to like review your work one more time before you send it. And then acknowledging mistakes and learning from them. So yeah, just wear something you feel confident in. Just like do your best to crush it. Spend a little extra time getting ready in the morning. Eat well, that kind of thing. For networking, I know that this is like everyone has, often people have strong reactions to the thought of networking. What I would say about networking is I never would kind of reach out to someone with the purpose of networking. A lot of times the way I thought about it was it's kind of more of an informational interview, learning more about what that person does. It's great to reach out to people before you have an ask of them, to just say like, I know that, you know, I have a couple adjacent teams where we ask a lot of them, and I'm glad that before I started working with those people, I just took a moment to introduce myself. Like we talked about where we were from, I learned about their kids, like things like that. Oh, nice, Lauren, thanks. Lauren put a little resource in the chats. And so I think it's just important to reach out to people before you have an ask of them, because then you can get to know them. And then that's also a time where you can ask them about their norms. Like, hey, I understand that I'm going to be working with you on this sort of thing. How do you like to proceed with this sort of task or with this sort of undertaking or project? So that's a helpful thing to do. And if you see somebody who's working in a really cool area, you can just like set up time with them to say, hi, I think, like, let's say I meet somebody who's in corporate social responsibility and I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds so cool. I would love to learn more about what our company does around this. Then you can connect under those guises. I feel like the actual like networking is just like a really intimidating term. So finding individuals and taking advantages of opportunities to connect is a much easier way to think about it. Group projects bring people together, seek them out. That's a good one. Also understanding your bandwidth. I've also had situations where I wanted to take on something that wasn't part of my core responsibilities. So I talked to my boss and said, hey, I'm really interested in developing my skills in this area, and this opportunity came up. Would I be able to work this into like my expected hours for the week? And then my boss was aware and supportive of me developing my career in this way. And so it was a lot easier to incorporate that sort of task or project into what my day-to-day was going to be, and helped me to not get overloaded. Remain positive. I mean, just like try to be the person that you would want to work with. And then LinkedIn and professional organizations. So like outside of work, you're going to be a young professional in a new place. Theoretically, maybe not a new place, maybe it's where you grew up, or maybe it's a college, but you're going to be functioning not as an undergraduate student, but as a professional. And so every city has different professional organizations. I know in Pittsburgh, we have Pump, which is one that's more oriented towards like, it's oriented towards both advocacy and intramural sports. So that's kind of fun. There's also the Ronald McDonald houses. They have Red Shoe Society. So I'm part of the Pittsburgh Red Shoe Society, and it's like a young adult board, basically. And so that's been really cool to be a part of, because I get to serve an organization that I find valuable. And I also get to be part of making connections with people in different industries and fields around Pittsburgh. So if I ever am going to try to look for a different job, I have this network that I've started to build. And then through LinkedIn, you can also start to get connected in different groups virtually beyond your geographic area. Penn State also has different chapters, so you can get involved with the alumni group. I'm also, shameless plug, part of the alumni liberal arts group. Oh, nice, Lauren. So like that's like why I'm here today, and I serve as a mentor. I think that's really great, and I've met other mentors who are who like live nearby me and people like that. And so there are lots of ways to get connected outside of your organization. social media. So I think Lauren talked a little bit about this, but do you want to expand on that one?
Yeah, so this is very similar from what I said at the beginning, of just kind of easing into, are the people that you're working with going to remain your peers, or are you going to develop a little bit more, like, closer relationships with them, including connecting on social media? So I'm sure that you all have heard this. I know that I heard this when I was like going through high school, so I'm sure that you all have too, is giving your social networks the grandmother test. Like, don't post anything on social media that you wouldn't want your grandmother to see. I think that when Mary Claire was talking about advocacy and political advocacy and like different views and stuff like that, I think that it's important to always just evaluate whether or not, like when you're going into different interviewing situations, whether the company and the organization, whether your values align. So that's just also something to keep in mind outside of just connecting with people on a one-to-one frame. Definitely avoid posting content about work. Like Mary Claire had said, it is absolutely okay to vent. I mean, I know I have difficult days where I just need to just rant about like what happened, or if something went wrong, or if I had whatever. But I don't do that like publicly. That's definitely something to kind of keep to yourself, just because then word can get out around, like within your network, that you're doing those different types of things. It's kind of the equivalent to if you're asked the question, like in an interview, who's the most difficult person that you've ever had to work with and why? You never want to name your supervisor, or something like that, because then the company that you're interviewing for might think, well, oh, they're trashing their supervisor right now. What are they going to be saying about me? So just kind of the same thing on social media. Like if you know, if you don't have anything nice to say, just kind of keep it to yourself, or use those things on like Instagram and Snapchat where you can just have your close group of friends and only post it to them. Just be careful that you don't accidentally put it out there to the world, especially if you have large followings. Accepting invitations. So I think that this again, like, is like appropriate on a one-to-one basis, kind of just like evaluating whether or not you're like just peers or friends within the workplace. And then plan in advance to manage requests, because social media is such a part of our lives. So I think as you connect closer to coworkers and gain those friendships, it's natural to want to connect. Just be aware of some of the consequences that may have, and just think through it before automatically accepting some of those invitations. LinkedIn is a different story. Obviously, like LinkedIn is a professional network, and I would say a majority of people use it as such. There's always outliers, but I think when you go in, when you do an informational interview, like Mary Claire was saying, like absolutely connect with people on LinkedIn to keep them in like that professional Rolodex.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. No, we only have a couple minutes left, so I'll cruise through these guys. So occupational wellness is really important, and really just, I would say, like, read up on what your company offers and take advantage of those services. Like, I have a well-being subsidy where I can spend $1,000 a year. I mean, it's like taxable, so it's not like totally $1,000 a year, but I mean, that's a ton. So, you know, just like see what your company has, and make sure that you're taking advantage of those services. Also, just make sure that you make those connections and build that trust and treat others with the respect you expect. Feeling inspired and challenged is difficult, and sometimes managers are a little stumped because they might not know where you're coming from. So help them to know what kind of work energizes you, so that you can continue to grow in your career and feel satisfied in where you are. Feel good at the end of the day about the work you accomplished. That's good. It reminds me of that Office episode. Anyway, I won't. Not enough time for that. So for improving these things, again, I'll cruise through this, but just check out these slides afterwards, and just make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because I got to the point where I wasn't, and then I needed to change jobs, and that was like, a very, I might have made it harder on myself than I could have if I had kind of kept these things in mind at my job. And then when it's time to move on. So with that, figure out if what you're doing is kind of fulfilling you. And if it's not, then it's important to proceed carefully. So conduct your job searches outside of work time. Activate the networks of people you trust. That might be people at your organization, your coworkers, especially peers. I talked to my manager about it whenever I was ready to move on, and I was initially looking outside my organization, and she was really supportive, because again, we had that relationship of trust. Definitely share with your employer 2 weeks before you're ready to depart. Start building the skills that you're looking for. Look at jobs that you want. Like, for example, my sister got her PMO certification because she realized that that was kind of something that was needed to get to the next role that she was looking at. And so those are things that's project management. So that's what certification she got. And she was able to land a job that was a lot more satisfactory than where she was. And then make sure that you leave the position in good hands, and leave on a positive note. Make sure that you're not like withholding information to like screw the next person in the role, things like that. Because those connections that you made at that first job might be really valuable for you in the future, and you kind of don't know how. So sorry, I'm like a minute over, but hopefully that was helpful. It's senior week. That's really exciting. So congrats to all of you. It's no small task, but feel free to reach out if you have any questions for me.
Yeah, Mary Claire, would you mind if I share your email address with those who are in
Oh yeah, go
attendance
for
today? Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm going to just steal back my screen share,
Oh yeah.
just because I know that we are running out of time, so we might not have time for questions. But for everyone who's here, tomorrow for Senior Week, we have our LinkedIn Do's and Don'ts webinar. So that's going to be presented by the college recruiter, Megan Eckert from Geico. And then we're also offering free professional LinkedIn photos. So you can drop into 139 Sparks building. It's right across from the 121 Sparks. And yeah, we'll be there from 1:30 to 4:30. And then this is just a friendly reminder to complete your senior survey. So but Mary Claire, thank you so incredibly much for everything today. I loved the presentation that you gave and all of the information. I like, as somebody who, I mean, we were on campus at the same time, like I feel like it's so relatable. So it was really nice to hear from you, and I can't thank you enough for your help.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will be talking to you soon. But yeah. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
everybody,
Emma,
for attending. And thank you, Emma. And we'll get going. All right. Thanks.
Sounds good. Bye.
Bye.